Hello again. I thought I'd just do a quick little video of the photo combiner box and its breakers. Some of these trailers will, if you lift up on this little door, you can then put a screw right there. Generally speaking, you really don't have to get in here very often. So having that screwed shut could be a good thing, but I will say that there's times when it's been very inconvenient. When you open this up, you can push back on this. I hate this. This thing is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. If you can push back on this and it will hold the door open, which has been kind of nice and convenient just when you're in here doing stuff. Now when it's in this up position, you can just give it a good yank, usually 2 hands, and that whole top will come out, but it has to be in that vertical position to come out very easily. Once you've got that off, you then can just put your fingers up here and that pulls down and forward, and that will open up your plastic cover case. And that then leaves you with your breakers. Now always be careful in here because this is live. These 2 wires are almost always live if the sun is shining. These wires come from the solar panels. I'll show you, actually those come down into here, and then one will come over here in the upper section right here. This hooks onto the solar panels, the MC4 connectors. And then the other side of the trailer, there's the little connectors right there again. And on the back side of the cabinet, it's these little guys right here. Now, one time, it was crazy. When they wired the connector from the solar panel, they actually had the polarity mixed up. And basically one side of the panels was feeding into the other and it burned up one panel. It's pretty crazy. So it is always good just to double check your polarity if you're ever messing around with these. To make sure it's coming off of the trailer, because if these happen to have been mixed up, then you might have the red wire, black wire in here mixed up, or they could have mixed it up over here, which could be crazy. I've seen it all. So let's talk about these little breakers real quick. Remember, these are always live. This is always live. That's coming directly from the battery. This is potentially a lot of power, and so are these. So if you're ever in here, be really careful. You have 2 grounding bars, one on the left and the right. They're connected with this one wire that comes across right there. And then I want to talk about the breakers for a little bit. This guy, this is breaker 1 and 2. You'll notice that it's double poled. So if you push them up, they both go up and down. There's a reason for this. As the energy comes in from one side of the solar panels, you'll notice that it comes into this first side, goes through the breaker, and then under here, this basically just bridges the 2 breakers, and then power comes back up through the breaker onto the back side of this top. And you'll see that there's this little black wire. That black wire then brings it over and touches onto the ends, or the finish side of breakers 3 and 4. So again, here's the other solar panel wire coming in, goes through the breaker, double pulls over and comes back up. And then you can see on the back side there that they have the 2 breakers bridged by that little black wire, and then they have a higher gauge wire coming out of that, and it comes down and feeds into the Midnight Charge controller. So this is a detailed layout of why things are wired the way they're wired. And then you'll notice that as power comes in to breaker number 5 directly from the battery, goes through a 63 amp breaker, and then that then comes down, and that will feed into the battery of this. So you have 2 positives coming into your Midnight Charge controller. You've got your battery that gives you power, and then you have a single solar panel power leg that comes down and goes over here, and that'll hook onto the PV positive on this side. Now, it's interesting. I just want to talk about this for a second, because whenever you have 2 solar panels here, basically this black wire in the back, it's making these are becoming parallel. So you have a parallel circuit right here. Now, when you are from a distance, if you had your panels, one facing the evening sun and one facing the morning sun, that's probably the worst thing you could do for your solars, because you're getting a wall of energy in the morning and not so much energy on the other side. And because these are in parallel right here, and to my knowledge, there's no diode, so power from one side is basically feeding into the other side. So your solar panels, I think it's hard on your solar panels to be connected where you have morning sun and evening sun. So I would recommend you always put your solar panels as equal in the sun as you possibly can, so that when they join and they become parallel on this black line right there, that your amps are as similar as they possibly can be. That way it'll join your amps, and then that feeds down into your Midnight Charge controller for your PV power, and that will work really good for charging a little bit more efficiently. And then in some trailers they have another switch here, which is number 6, and breaker number 6 is just for the lights. If you happen to have lights on your trailer, that's what breaker 6 is for. Some of the newer trailers also have some components down here underneath here for broadcasting and transmitting, like, you know, data. That I've seen breaker 6 used for that as well. And then obviously you can see you're limited to 6 breakers because of this. This box is only good for 6, but there's plenty of room in there for more. It's just the plastic cover. Okay, so since I'm talking about this breaker box, I'll just mention down here underneath breaker number 6, you'll notice that this line will come into what they call a Polaris plug. A Polaris plug is just basically a wing nut for a high gauge wire or high amperage situation. And it looks like a, I don't even know what it, I mean, people with the trailers know what it looks like, but this goes in, and then you'll have 2 wires come out, one to breaker number 5, another one to breaker number 6, and that's how DC power from the battery is fed to breaker 6. And then breaker 6 then will come up, go through this, and then it goes down and connects for the trailers that actually have the light control box that's right here. You have 2 little timers, and that's how the DC power finds its way down to those little timers. Anyway, the Polaris plug, I have seen a situation where these little short wires going in here just get completely corroded. Like, I don't know if it's just oxygenation or if it's like some kind of a type of metal conductor where, forget the word for it, but it's where the metal will degrade, or there could even be like microamps or something that just happened to kind of burn up the sheathing on the wire, and then it causes the wire not to work as well. I mean, it could be from oxygenization. How's that word for you? And then once the wire oxidizes, then it starts generating heat, and then the heat can get really bad. I've actually seen situations where the front cover of this was melted right here just because it was radiating so much heat after that Polaris plug. And it could be because the wire is so short that it's just more prone or, susceptible to the oxygenization. I want you to notice that they're 15 amp breakers coming from the solar panels. Okay, so the reason they're double pole is there's so much live energy coming from your solar that if one of these breakers fail, you have a backup. And that's the reason why it doesn't change anything. It's literally they're in series. So it comes down through that breaker, loops over, and comes back up. So they are in series. That you're not benefiting anything for being in parallel or anything like that. So if one breaker doesn't fail, you have a backup just in case this one says warn, like, oh no, we're over 15 amps, and then it'll trip. Now, there's been some trailers, these little guys here are rated for 3,200 watts. Once you exceed 3,200 watts, they recommend you getting a second Midnight Charge controller. And I would even say 3,200 watts is the upper tier of what you want to push through these. But because these can handle more energy, if you are only ever seeing about 2,000 watts that you're harvesting, you could arguably add another array of panels and just put a parallel connector on the back over here. Like as it comes in here, you can buy these little Y adapters. You can hook a little Y adapter on right here, and then that would enable you to have another set of panels that you could just lean up maybe on the southern side of the trailer. But anyway, so if you got 15 panels coming in here, you potentially could have more amps coming through this 15 amp breaker, because these panels that come with the trailers, they're typically 8 amps. And so if you have 2 panels that you are having go through one of these breakers, it's more apt to flip or trip, because 15 amps times, 8 times 2, I mean, or 15 amps with 2 parallel solar panel arrays of 8 amps each, you could very likely exceed 16 amps, and that will cause this to break or trip. The wiring in here is capable of handling more, so you could probably upgrade this to 20 amps, but I always recommend that you double check the gauge wire and make sure that it's rated for that. But 20 amps, I believe, is an easy change. So if you do happen to push more solar in, you can just upgrade one of these 2 double poles, and then whichever line you're bringing more amps in through the Y adapter, you can adjust that. But anyway, there you go. Just a quick little video about the photo combiner box, and hopefully this was helpful. Oh, I will say that I have had situations where these wires coming in here were loose. And like one day this was working fine, the next day it wasn't, the next day it was. I was like, what's going on? And I found out that like one of these wires, like it hadn't even been tightened down yet. And so I just had to, check all these connections in here to make sure they're snug and tight. But again, live wire, live wire. If you're in here poking around with a screwdriver, I don't want the current going through you. So if you're ever gonna work in this box, the best thing to do is turn off all these breakers into the off position, and then in addition to that, you should disconnect the battery, the Anderson connector for the battery right there, and you should also disconnect the solar on both sides over there and over here. That would pretty much ensure that there's no DC power going into the cabinet, and then you can more safely operate inside this box. My master electrician always checks the circuit, even when he thinks everything's off. He'll get his voltmeter out and he'll actually test everything to make sure everything is truly dead. That is a really good habit to get into, and I recommend everybody here seriously consider that if you're ever going to work inside this box, or if you're going to work inside the cabinet or on any of these plugs that are in here, just for your own safety. All right, we'll talk to you all later. Goodbye.